So the Media Effects Lab, what do we do there? We are looking at how we can use media technology as well as content to sort of improve the human spirit and condition, right? That sounds a little bit cliched, so the question is, how do we operationalize what do we mean by the human spirit and condition? So in order to do that, we take our cues from the United Nations Sustainable Goals Program. So we have these 17 sustainable goals. So what we are really trying to say here is, as long as any problem that we are asked to solve falls under the ambit of one or more of these, then it's fair game to us, right? So that's what we're trying to do. So we have a lot of latitude here to focus on some really important societal issues which appeal to us as a global community, really, of scholars and practitioners. So for example, one of the focus areas in the lab, to most people here, I would presume, is the importance of climate change, for example, right? So look at the range of questions that we can ask regarding climate change, right? So you can certainly ask in terms of what would be some of the issues that we need to communicate to audiences about. We can also ask in terms of who are the communities affected. So for example, if you talk about like a topic like sea level rise, it's something that's going to affect people in Miami more so than those of us in Gainesville, right? So we're also talking about that. We also want to talk about it in terms of who are the people who can be persuaded, what are the agents of persuasion. Persuasion is something which is very important to all of what we do here. So very importantly, the question is, how do we go about communicating these stories? That's really the key question that we're trying to answer. If we have a range of these questions, right? So in order to do that, we adopt the media effects approach. This is really the experimental psychology approach. And very quickly, we are looking at it in terms of the causal effect relationship here. So the causes could be really in terms of the importance of the message, the content of the information. Very importantly, obviously, since we're all in media and communication here, we're looking at the different platforms of different technologies. Also, we look at it in terms of the audience or the recipient factors. So all these, either individually or in concert, could have an impact on what the effects could be. The typical effects that we try and measure are the psychological effects, the classic ones of attitudes, how something makes us feel, cognitions, how something makes us think. Very importantly, and that's why I have this in red, how we behave, right? We know that behaviors are the holy grail, but it's also so difficult to measure actual behaviors. In addition to that, we're also trying to gauge some of the mechanisms by which we can understand some of these effects. So we have some sophisticated instruments in our labs. Many of you are familiar with some of these. So we also measure physiological responses. So we have something called the eye motion sensor suite. So we can measure people's skin conductance responses. So that gives us a measure of how arousing or how interesting a content is. We have, for example, eye tracking sensors with attention grabbing devices. So we can sort of look at it in terms of how much attention someone is paying. That's a good measure of cognition. In addition to that, we also have a rather new set of software called Affectiva, where we can track around 27 different facial expressions. The question then, the broad question, I'm giving you like a little bit of a snapshot. How do we leverage virtual reality to influence public perceptions and behaviors? So let me give you an overview of some of the work that we've been doing in my lab. So going back to some of the questions that we posed earlier regarding climate change. So let me give you an example or examples of some of the studies that we've done here. So we've tried to focus on the issue of ocean acidification here. We've done a series of studies. What we've tried to do is to immerse people in either a very immersive medium. So how do they respond to this issue if they're immersed in a headset and they're actually in the shoes of, so the presence is there, right? And we've also tried to look at it in terms of some other factors. Do people respond to this differently depending on whether they perceive the threat to be something which is imminent in their community or whether it's something which could be affecting a distant community, right? So we've done a series of studies, and here is a big picture finding, that graph there, okay? And what that's really telling us is that when you think that the threat is something which is affecting your own community, it doesn't matter how you experience the story, right? But the really interesting finding that we see here is when the threat is something which is affecting a distant community, right? Experiencing it in a more immersive format brings the issue home closer to you.